A bloodstained tapestry. A death whispered through the foggy canals of Venice. Somewhere beneath the gilded palaces and shadowed alleys, secrets older than the city itself were waiting to be unraveled. One letter, delivered across the sea, would draw the most brilliant detective in New York into a world of art, deceit, and murder. A world where every detail, every gesture, and every thread could conceal a lie, or a deadly truth. No one in Venice suspected that what appeared to be a crime of passion was, in fact, a meticulously crafted puzzle, designed to challenge even the keenest mind. As the fog rolls over the canals, and shadows stretch like fingers across ancient stone, one thing is certain: someone will try to hide the truth, but it will not remain hidden for long. Step inside the mystery, follow the trail of intellect and deception, and see if you can uncover the truth before the master detective himself does. If you love unraveling dark mysteries, exploring hidden clues, and witnessing brilliant detective work, don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more suspenseful tales, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. Share this adventure with fellow mystery lovers, because in a world full of secrets, the more eyes searching, the sooner the truth is revealed. Chapter 1: The Venetian Envelope. The morning in the brownstone on West 35th Street was deceptively calm, the kind of calm that only precedes something unusual. Archie Goodwin, perched on the edge of his desk chair, flicked a page of his report like a man waiting for an omen, while the faint aroma of Wolfe's morning coffee mingled with the scent of orchids, their fragile blooms swaying gently on the windowsill. The city outside was gray, wet from an early drizzle, but inside, the brownstone exuded warmth and a peculiar orderliness that only Nero Wolfe could command. The orchids were arranged with exacting precision, each pot aligned with the edge of a Persian rug, and Fritz moved silently through the kitchen, humming under his breath as he prepared Wolfe's breakfast with military precision. At precisely 11 minutes past 10, the doorbell buzzed once, then twice, hesitated, and faded into silence. Archie's head snapped toward it with the reflexive curiosity of a man used to interruptions that never meant good news. He opened the door to reveal Fritz, holding a small, cream-colored envelope in his gloved hand. The envelope was thick, luxurious, and bore a faint watermark embossed in the upper corner: Hotel Danieli, Venezia. Archie raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's mistaken us for a travel agency," he said dryly, taking the envelope. The wax seal was unbroken, stamped with an ornate V, intertwined with a crown, and the scent of aged paper and something faintly floral drifted from it. Wolfe, reclining in his enormous leather chair with a cup of steaming coffee cradled between his massive hands, lifted one heavy eyelid and nodded. "Read it," he said in that low, measured voice that carried authority without haste. Archie slid a letter opener through the seal and unfolded the crisp stationery. The handwriting was exquisite, slanted, and careful, almost like a piece of art in itself. "Mr. Wolfe, I implore your assistance. A crime has been committed, a theft, a death, and a deception that may soon shake the city of Venice. Enclosed are 2 first-class tickets. I will await you at the Danieli, where the shadows never sleep. Countess Isata Villani." Archie whistled softly, the sound carrying faintly across the polished office. "Well," he said, "she's generous, I'll give her that. But you on a transatlantic flight? I'd sooner see you attend a square dance in a bathing suit." Wolfe grunted, the sound of disdain disguised as indifference. "Pfui. I do not leave my house for trivialities," he said, his voice absolute and immovable as a tombstone. He set down his cup with meticulous care and adjusted his massive frame in the chair, the leather creaking under his bulk. Archie felt the familiar tug of exasperation and anticipation. Nothing in Wolfe's life ever happened casually, and yet something in the letter had struck an uncharacteristic chord. Archie leaned forward. "You're saying you're going to ignore this? Or are you just stalling while you think up some excuse?" Wolfe's eyes, barely visible under heavy lids, fixed on the envelope. "I dislike Venice," he said slowly, "but I detest ignorance even more. If there is a crime, And if the tapestry of which she speaks is bloodstained, I must know, if only to prove that a fool could be mistaken in his assumptions. Archie's mouth fell open slightly. Wolfe rarely let curiosity override comfort, and yet here it was, a crack in the veneer of immobility. You're serious? Entirely. Prepare the arrangements, Wolfe said. 2 tickets first class. We leave at once. Archie blinked. At once? He looked around the office, imagining the orchids, the stacks of reports, the smell of Wolfe's coffee, all the little comforts of the brownstone left behind for Venice. You do realize we're leaving in, 24 hours? You and Venice. The canals. The fog. The art. The smells. Not to mention the flying. Wolfe, unperturbed, took a long sip of his coffee and set the cup down with a soft clink. Pack lightly, Archie. And bring your wits. You will need them more than your trousers. And so, barely 24 hours after the mysterious envelope arrived, Archie Goodwin found himself sitting on a long, narrow airplane seat somewhere over the Atlantic, watching Wolfe do the unthinkable, sleep. Wolfe, for all his bulk and reluctance, slept as if he owned the clouds themselves. The stewardess hovered politely, unsure if she should offer them anything, while Archie flipped through the letter again, tracing the elegant handwriting and wondering what awaited them among the foggy canals and shadowed palaces of Venice. Outside the small, rounded windows, clouds scud past like ghosts. Inside, the brownstone's calm had been replaced by the roar of engines and the anticipation of something much larger, a puzzle that demanded intellect sharper than any sword or dagger. Archie leaned back, thinking of Countess Isata Vellani, of blood-stained tapestries, of shadows that never slept. Somewhere in Venice, a secret awaited, a secret that would test every ounce of Wolfe's legendary powers, and Archie's ability to keep pace. And somewhere in the distance, the city of canals waited, indifferent, timeless, and darkly beautiful. Chapter 2: The Tapestry of Shadows. Venice did not greet them with sun or warmth. The city rose from the mist like a dream half-remembered, all stone and water and the faint, acrid tang of the lagoon. Gondolas slid silently along the canals, their black hulls cutting through fog as if through smoke. The Danieli, a palace draped in faded velvet and gilded decay, loomed over the Grand Canal, its windows reflecting morning light like fragments of shattered jewels. Archie had never felt so far from Manhattan, and yet, he could feel Wolfe's presence behind him like a dark cloud of intellect and expectation, as Wolfe inspected the hotel lobby with his usual mixture of disdain and scrutiny. The Countess Isata Vellani awaited them in the lounge. She was tall, pale, and elegant, with eyes like chipped emeralds, and the faintest tremor in her hands betrayed nerves that a life of privilege and careful poise had never fully erased. She rose gracefully as Wolfe and Archie approached, her voice measured, yet carrying the exhaustion of someone who had stared too long into the abyss. "My husband Cesare is dead," she said immediately, cutting straight to the bone. "They say it was suicide. I know it was not." Wolfe inclined his massive head slightly, the single gesture heavier than most men's words. "Your certainty," he said, "is interesting. Proceed." She gestured toward a low table, where a photograph lay beside a folded envelope. Cesare was the curator of the Palazzo Vellani Gallery. 3 nights ago, during the unveiling of the Tapestry of San Marco, a relic of our family, centuries old, the lights went out. When they returned, Cesare was found dead in his office. The tapestry had been slashed, and the police found his fingerprints on the knife. Archie shifted in his chair, absorbing the information with the practiced nonchalance of a man accustomed to murder. "So, the husband's dead, the tapestry's ruined, and you want to prove somebody else did it. Any suspects?" The Countess's gaze drifted to the fog-darkened canal outside, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Too many. The critic who condemned my husband's restoration work, the patron who coveted the tapestry, and the art historian, a woman, who loved him." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "And the blood on the tapestry? It is Cesare's," she said, almost mechanically. But the cut, across justice itself, is no accident. It mocks him, or perhaps it accuses. Archie tilted his head, frowning. Justice, huh? Sounds like a lot of symbolism for a crime scene. Someone's really sending a message, or someone's trying to make it look that way. Wolfe said nothing, merely tilted his head, as if the silence itself could extract truths hidden from the unobservant eye. Archie had learned long ago that Wolfe's silence was rarely idle. It was the sound of calculation. Later that evening, Archie walked the narrow Venetian alleys under a drizzle that turned the cobblestones into slick mirrors. Gondoliers hummed faintly, their voices carrying across water like whispers. Somewhere in the labyrinth of canals, shadows shifted, and he imagined eyes watching, silent and patient. He returned to the Danieli near midnight, photographs and a folder of police statements in hand. Wolfe awaited him, seated in a high-backed chair beside the flickering glow of a single lamp. "Well?" Wolfe said, voice low, precise, deliberate. Archie dropped the papers on the table. "Looks like a classic he did it scenario if you believe the evidence. But there's something off. One witness claims she saw someone leave the office before the lights came back on, wearing Cesari's coat." Wolfe's lips curved ever so slightly, a movement Archie had come to recognize as the precursor to reasoning that would astonish both men and police alike. "Excellent," Wolfe murmured. "Then perhaps the tapestry is not the only forgery involved. Let us not assume the obvious. The obvious is rarely sufficient." Archie frowned, intrigued despite himself. "Forgery? You mean the tapestry?" Wolfe tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest. "The tapestry, yes. And possibly the narrative constructed around the man's death. There is always more than meets the eye in crimes of this sophistication. An execution of deception requires planning, intellect, and audacity, traits I suspect among our acquaintances in Venice." He paused, inhaling the faint, humid scent of the city that had somehow found its way through the open window. "The blood, the slit, the coat, they are messages, Archie. And one does not commit murder and leave messages without expecting someone to read them." Archie exhaled slowly. "You make it sound like Cesare was sending postcards from beyond the grave." Wolfe gave him a look that could slice marble. "Do not trivialize the evidence, Goodwin. Messages are often hidden where the unobservant would never think to look. And in this case, I suspect the message lies in the tapestry itself." Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the lights of the hotel and blurring the edges of reality. Inside, Wolfe and Archie were already moving along a trail of intellect that promised murder, art, deception, and perhaps justice. In the heart of Venice, a city that had witnessed centuries of intrigue, the first threads of a puzzle were now firmly in Wolfe's hands, threads that, if pulled correctly, would unravel a truth far stranger than murder alone. Chapter 3: The Venetian Circle. The Danieli's Grand Hall was an opulent relic of Venetian history, gilded ceilings, faded frescoes, and chandeliers that trembled ever so slightly when the humid air settled like a cloak. Wolfe's suite, a corner of the hotel he had transformed into a command post, smelled faintly of imported cigars, leather, and the subtle perfume of orchids he had insisted be sent along. Archie watched Wolfe arrange his evidence with deliberate care, laying photographs of the slashed tapestry, Cesari's office, and the footprints outside the gallery in precise order. Wolfe's massive hands hovered over the materials, moving them as if playing a silent game only he understood. The first to arrive was Johnny Moretti, the art critic whose tongue had bitten more reputations than any dagger. He entered the room with the arrogance of a man accustomed to influencing opinion and the subtle whiff of cheap tobacco trailing him. "Villani was a fraud," he began without preamble. "The tapestry was a masterpiece of deceit before it was slashed. Cesare tried to restore history with paint and thread, and he sullied it. He deserved scrutiny, not sympathy." Archie noted the man's restless movements, his hands jittering slightly as they brushed along the edges of a gilded console table. Wolfe, ever still, merely inclined his head. "Your critique is noted," he said evenly. "And your presence here? Coincidence or evidence in itself?" Moretti's smile was thin, more a sneer than a gesture of civility. "I am here because truth matters. If Villani was murdered, I wished to see justice served. Next was Lucia Ferreira, the historian. She entered with a grace that seemed practiced, yet her composure faltered as soon as Wolfe mentioned Cesari's name. Her eyes, bright and green as Venetian glass, reflected both intellect and emotion. "We work together," she said softly, her voice trembling at first. "Cesare was passionate, brilliant, reckless. I once loved him. But I cannot claim I understand the events of that night. I was not there." Wolfe's gaze pierced her as if looking past flesh to thought. "You loved him. And yet you did not save him?" I did not know how," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Finally, Piero Dandolo, a shipping magnate who had bankrolled the gallery's restoration, entered. His cufflinks glimmered like gilt, and his tailored suit did not hide the tension coiled in his broad shoulders. "If the tapestry is ruined," he said curtly, "so is my investment. I was fond of Cesare, even respected him, but I did not kill him. Nor did I touch the tapestry beyond funding its restoration." Archie leaned back in his chair and whispered to Wolfe. "They all seem guilty, or at least, annoyingly self-important." Wolfe barely responded. He had already begun to trace a pattern, noting every gesture, every hesitation, every misaligned fact. He moved slowly to the photograph of the bloodstained tapestry, eyes narrowing. "Observe this cut," he said softly. "The blade was wielded with precision. And the smear of blood, deliberate placement. This was intended to communicate something, or to conceal it." Archie raised an eyebrow. "Conceal? You mean like someone's hiding a secret in the threads?" "Exactly," Wolfe replied. "Cesari's death is but a symptom. The tapestry itself is a puzzle, a record of deeds concealed in thread, paint, and wax. One must examine not only the fibers but the intent behind their disruption." He gestured toward the wax traces on the edge of the tapestry, faint but present. "Venetian sealing wax. Used to secure letters, to hide something within folds. Someone, and I suspect a knowledgeable hand, used it to hide an object or a message. That object has been removed, or perhaps replaced. Whoever did this anticipated investigation, and yet underestimated the acuity of those who follow." The three suspects watched him silently, unease creeping into their polished exteriors. Archie noted that both Moretti and Dandolo's eyes flicked toward each other whenever Wolfe spoke of hidden evidence, while Lucia's gaze remained fixed on the floor, lips pressed tightly together. Later that evening, Wolfe insisted they examine the tapestry at the Palazzo Villani gallery itself. The gallery smelled of old wood, varnish, and damp stone. Candlelight flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like silent witnesses. Wolfe, magnifying glass in hand, examined the fibers in detail, tracing the cut and the waxed folds. "Someone folded this," Wolfe murmured, almost to himself. "To hide something delicate, or someone. A letter, a document, perhaps even a confession. And the killer may have cut it free, believing it to be the only evidence. Yet," he paused, eyes narrowing. "Yet Cesare may have anticipated this." Archie shook his head. "Anticipated? You mean he left a backup plan?" "Yes," Wolfe said softly. "A copy. Art can deceive as cleverly as a mind trained in duplicity. And the original truth may now reside where the killer cannot hope to find it." Outside, Venice was silent except for the gentle lapping of water and the occasional cry of a gull. Inside, Wolfe and Archie felt the first real stirrings of the puzzle's complexity. The suspects were no longer just individuals with motives. They were pieces in a game of intellect, cunning, and concealed truths. One false move, one careless assumption, and the entire design could collapse. Archie whispered, "You really think the tapestry itself is a message?" Wolfe's heavy eyes glimmered. "Not merely a message, Goodwin. It is a confession, a trap, and perhaps a testament to human folly. And one of these people," he said, sweeping a hand toward the gathered suspects, "is about to demonstrate precisely how much they feared discovery." The fog outside thickened again, wrapping the city in a shroud of secrecy. Within the grand hall, shadows lengthened and twisted. Venice had witnessed centuries of intrigue, and tonight, it would witness the quiet, deliberate unraveling of one more mystery, orchestrated, as always, by Nero Wolfe. Chapter 4: Death in the Lagoon. The morning fog hung over Venice like a shroud, softening the outlines of the palaces and canals, turning reality into a watercolor of gray and silver. Archie Goodwin had risen early, compelled by the uneasy anticipation that seemed to hum in the air. He had wandered the narrow alleys of the city before breakfast, listening to the distant tolling of church bells, the faint clatter of wooden shutters, and the soft, ominous lap of water against stone. Venice, he realized, had a rhythm of its own, a rhythm that was both alluring and dangerous. Returning to the Danieli, Archie found a group of hotel staff gathered near the front entrance, whispers cutting through the humid air like knives. Inspector Belladonna, a portly man whose presence seemed permanently tethered to a puff of self-importance, was trying to manage the crowd. Another body, one of the staff whispered to Archie. Near the Rialto. A man floating. They say his throat is cut. Archie felt the familiar twinge of dread. He moved quickly to Wolfe, who was sitting in the suite, his massive frame resting against the velvet cushions, eyes half-closed yet alert. Wolfe regarded the news with measured interest, as if the unfolding tragedy were a specimen under examination. Another death, Wolfe murmured. Expected in a sense, but unnecessary for the solution unless it is intended to complicate matters. Who is he? Johnny Moretti, Archie replied grimly. The art critic. The one who insisted Villani was a fraud. Found floating near the Rialto. Throat cut. The inspector says the case is closed. Villani did it, naturally. Wolfe's heavy brows drew together. Do not accept superficiality. Deaths may be consequences, but they are not explanations. This man's end was deliberate, performed with precision. There is intellect behind it. And intellect often leaves subtle traces, traces that careless authorities fail to see. Archie nodded. Meaning, someone wants to hide the truth about Cesare, or the tapestry. Exactly, Wolfe said. Observe the sequence. Cesare dies first, apparently self-inflicted, but we know better. The tapestry is slashed. Moretti dies next, silenced perhaps, for noticing discrepancies. The pattern is deliberate. The killer anticipates attention but seeks to mislead. There is art here, Goodwin, art and calculation intertwined. Later that day, Wolfe and Archie returned to the Palazzo Villani gallery. The air smelled faintly of varnish, damp stone, and the lingering perfume of old wealth. Wolfe examined the scene meticulously, tracing the fibers of the tapestry with magnifying glass and steady, precise hands. He examined the wax traces again, noting subtle impressions that suggested folding, sealing, and concealment. Someone hid a message, Wolfe said softly, almost to himself. Venetian wax. Sealed in folds. And removed, perhaps, with the belief that it would go unnoticed. Archie frowned. Removed? Meaning they took whatever Cesare left behind? Possibly, Wolfe said. Or perhaps they replaced it. But Cesare, clever man, may have anticipated this. A backup, hidden in plain sight. A copy, indistinguishable except to the observant. Archie's eyes widened. A copy of the tapestry? Yes, Wolfe replied, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Or of the message within it. The killer, in thinking they eliminated the evidence, may have overlooked that the truth was never where they believed it to be. As evening fell, the Venetian fog deepened, and the canal waters darkened to black ink. Wolfe and Archie reconvened in the Danieli suite, laying out photographs, police reports, and wax samples on the table. Archie noted that both Dandolo and Lucia were growing increasingly uneasy under Wolfe's scrutiny. Subtle shifts in posture, micro-expressions, and glances toward the door betrayed their anxiety. Observe carefully, Archie, Wolfe said. There is a common thread connecting these deaths and the tapestry. It is not merely jealousy, passion, or money, although those elements exist. It is knowledge. Each act was driven by the desire to control what was known. Cesare possessed it. The killer attempted to suppress it, and Moretti observed it. Archie leaned back, exhaling slowly. So the tapestry isn't just a piece of art. It's a puzzle, a confession, and a weapon all at once. Wolfe nodded. Precisely. And one misstep, one overlooked detail, will reveal the perpetrator. Our task is to observe, to calculate, to recognize intent hidden in material form, and then to confront them. A faint knocking at the door interrupted their deliberation. Fritz entered, holding a small, folded letter. "For Mr. Wolfe, sir," he said. Wolfe accepted it, unfolding the parchment with his usual deliberation. The handwriting was distinct, unmistakable, Cesari's. Archie leaned over his shoulder, reading the first line. "I have done something unforgivable, but not criminal. Beware those who covet what should not be theirs." Wolfe's gaze was sharp, almost luminous. A warning. And a clue. The killer has acted yet has left a signature of arrogance. This is the final puzzle piece, Archie. Now we must prepare for the revelation, and the confrontation. Outside, Venice remained indifferent, its fog concealing alleys and canals where shadows whispered and secrets slept. Inside, Wolfe and Archie traced the threads of murder, deception, and concealed truths, preparing for the final act. The game was approaching its climax. And as Wolfe always knew, in the shadows of intellect, the guilty often reveal themselves, by design or by folly. Chapter 5: The Final Pattern. The grand hall of the Palazzo Villani was silent except for the occasional whisper of candle flames and the distant tolling of St. Mark's bells. Wolfe had insisted that all parties be gathered: Countess Isotta Villani, still pale but defiant, Lucia Ferrera, eyes wide with apprehension, Piero Dandolo, composed yet tense, and Inspector Belladonna, puffing slightly, his dignity intact but fraying at the edges. At the center of the room hung the tapestry of San Marco, its golden threads gleaming under the flickering candlelight, the slashes from earlier now revealed as deliberate and symbolic rather than chaotic. Wolfe, massive and immovable as ever, stood before it, his eyes half-closed yet alight with the certainty of revelation. Archie Goodwin leaned against a column, notebook in hand, ready to record the unspooling of truth. "Observe," Wolfe began, his voice carrying through the hall like the tolling of a bell. "What most see as mere fabric is in fact a narrative. A tale of deceit, passion, and calculation. Cesare Villani did not die for art. He died for truth." A hush fell. Even the flickering candles seemed to pause. "This tapestry," Wolfe continued, gesturing with deliberate precision, "is not 6 centuries old. It is a masterful reproduction, painstakingly woven by Cesare himself. The original, as records he discovered, was sold years ago to settle family debts. Cesare, upon discovering the deception, chose to expose it, and to do so, he embedded a message within the folds of his work." Archie scribbled furiously, glancing up at the gathered suspects. Dandolo's expression shifted subtly, a hint of apprehension. Lucia's hands clenched together, the tremor in her jaw betraying her calm facade. "The blood on the tapestry," Wolfe continued, "was meant as misdirection. The cut forms the shape of Libra, justice. A signature, yes, but also a trap for the unimaginative." He turned his gaze sharply to Lucia Ferrera. "You loved him, Miss Ferrera. But when Cesare revealed that the tapestry, your scholarly achievement, your authentication, was a reproduction, you panicked. You donned his coat during the blackout, wielded his knife, and staged his death as suicide. Later, you eliminated Johnny Moretti when he discovered your flight." Lucia's face drained of color. Her voice, barely a whisper, trembled. I did not mean. I only..." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Intent does not absolve action. The signature is in your arrogance. The cut, the wax, the folds, all reveal knowledge only you possessed. Even your motive is traced in micro-expressions, glances, and the subtle betrayals of posture. You left your signature in more than thread, you left it in behavior." Archie stepped forward. "She didn't think anyone would notice the Libra shape." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "It is a detail only the intelligent would perceive. And it is what unraveled your plan. Cesare anticipated cleverness. He left a backup within the tapestry, a copy of the message, hidden in folds, undetectable unless one knew what to look for. You believed you destroyed the evidence. In truth, you exposed yourself. Lucia stammered, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dandolo exhaled slowly, relief mixed with apprehension, while the Countess remained still, a mixture of grief and vindication on her face. Wolfe gestured toward the tapestry. The original remains elsewhere, as Cesare intended. What hangs before us is a testament to human error, passion, and the inevitability of truth. Each thread, each cut, each smear of blood, deliberately orchestrated to reveal not only the crime but the criminal. Inspector Belladonna, looking both humbled and astonished, finally spoke. Madonna mia! You have done in 2 days what my men could not do in a week. Wolfe inclined his massive head. Observation, deduction, and careful attention to behavior, tools of the mind far sharper than any sword. Justice, in this case, is subtle, deliberate, and inevitable. Archie glanced back at Wolfe once the inspector had led Lucia away in custody. So, worth the trip? Wolfe's lips twitched, the faintest trace of a smile. Venice is wet, treacherous, and smells of decay. But deceit, he added softly, has a fragrance universal to all latitudes. Archie grinned. Meaning you're glad we came? Wolfe's heavy eyes fixed on the tapestry for a long moment. I will admit, the tapestry was well woven. And in its weaving, we have found truth. Outside, the Venetian fog lifted slightly, revealing the gleaming canals and the quiet majesty of a city that had witnessed centuries of intrigue. The bells of St. Mark's tolled softly across the water, as if marking the end of one story and the subtle beginning of another. Archie slung his notebook under his arm, casting one last glance at the hall, the suspects gone, the tapestry silent but triumphant. Wolfe remained motionless, a sentinel of intellect and precision. Venice, for all its shadows, had surrendered its secret, and in doing so, had confirmed once again that truth, like art, is inescapable, inevitable, and endlessly fascinating. And as they departed the palazzo, Wolfe murmured over his shoulder. Observe closely, Archie. In the details, one finds both deception and revelation. That is the only justice worthy of a master. The city exhaled, the canals reflecting the first glimmers of sunlight. The game was over. The pattern was complete. And for Nero Wolfe, Venice had proved itself, if nothing else, a worthy challenge. White heavy check marked the end.